There we go.
And they're all. We are online and very welcome to the Cooperative City in Quarantine, episode 6 on the Urban Commons, developed in partnership with the Generative Commons project. Today, I am Daniela Patti, and today I'm moderating here with Alessandra Quarta, partner in crime in the GECO project. So welcome, Alessandra.
Hi, Daniela. Hello, everybody.
So today we have a very challenging and exciting topic that is on the urban commons, which is one of these words that sometimes you never know exactly what it means. But what we will be exploring today is how we believe that it actually is a great opportunity to face the challenges that are ahead of us, also in reconstructive a more cohesive society as a result of this COVID crisis, because we do know that there are quite some challenges ahead. And before we get into introducing our interesting and very international guests, Alessandra, would you like to give us a few words about how this episode came along and why did we think of doing this together today?
Yes, so we have started to organize this meeting thinking that the activities that we are carrying out during the project are very connected with the necessity to build solidarity during this COVID emergency. As you said, Daniela, before, GECO Living Lab is a project in which we are trying to collect and map solidarity experiences in Europe. We call them Generative Commons because we think that they are able to introduce a new model of development and a new way to build solidarity and social cohesion in Europe. And we know that many experiences in Europe exist, but in many cases they are not connected and they are facing the same problems. And it is very difficult to create a common background and a common knowledge about these experiences. So we are trying to create a sort of infrastructure for facilitating these connections and the creation of this network. And during this period, we were thinking to solidarity in the crisis. During the project, we met many associations, many municipalities, many informal groups who normally provide welfare services, who normally react to the economic crisis or the environmental crisis and so on. And so we start to think what they are doing in this period, what kind of response they are organizing to deal with the COVID emergency. Obviously, it's an odd question in some sense, because we know that cooperation and solidarity need physical contact. And it's not so easy to think to a political reaction in a period in which we are completely separated, all closed in our homes, and so on. And so we have organized this event for sharing responses to understand what is happening in Europe and what is the bottom-up response that the organization in this period are providing, responding to very common social needs. And in fact, I think that we will explore many solutions, but in all these cases, we will see that they share a common core of solidarity and a common core of responses to the crisis.
So thanks, Alessandra. So we have a very, very active series of topics ahead of us, and we have a very interesting panel. So we would like to introduce you to our panelists of today. So before getting into the content, let's get a bit of an idea of who's with us. So we have Ugo Mattei from the University of Turin. Hello, Ugo.
Hello, very nice to be here.
Hi, Ugo. So you're in Turin. What week of lockdown are you in now?
I'm in Turin, yes, and I'm looking forward to this panel to learn how everything is happening, what is happening elsewhere.
That will be exciting. And this brings us to the thing that we will be with. We have Duygu Toprak from Ankara in Turkey.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Hi. So you were telling us that things in Turkey are quite interesting, and the lockdown in Turkey is a bit more creative than it is in other places.
Yes, I believe there are other
creative examples all over the world, but we have this weekend lockdowns.
Okay.
I think the major idea is that we cannot jeopardize our economy. So most of the population, well, goes to work because it's needed, and it's just highlights the already existing inequalities in this society, that some privileged can, well, stay home as the government asks us to do, whereas most people don't have this luxury. So that's why we have this creative kind of lockdown. We are locked in our houses during the weekend, national holidays, and I think this will go on at least for about a month.
Okay, thank you, Dourida. And you recently published a book on the commons in Turkey, so we're very, very curious to know more about the Turkish context. So very welcome with us today. Our other speakers then, we move on to Paris, where we have Locret from Plateau Urbain. Hello, Martin.
Hello. Hello, how are you?
Fine, fine. So how are things with you? How are things there?
Things are good. As I was telling you when we were chatting a bit before, we are all in a complete lockdown, minus the 15 minutes we are allowed to every day to go and have a walk. But things are good so far, so I can't complain on my side of things.
And I assume that the Plateau Urbain, so for those of you we probably know, and if you don't, we're curious to know about it, is this very, very large project in Paris.
Yeah.
Is all closed right now?
So not all of them, and that's actually part of the things I'm going to explain today, is that we were able to keep open some of our spaces so we could help respond to the COVID emergency and actually provide the first emergency necessities for the people that are the most vulnerable, in these times, and namely homeless people or people that are already living in a state of precarity.
Okay, fantastic. Very good. So there you go. So that's already a bit of the highlights of why we do need to have this. We do need all these community spaces to be available. Absolutely. So now we move on to Brussels. So Joaquin, hello.
Hello there. Hi, Daniela. Hi, everyone.
So Joaquin de Santos is one of our partners in the JCO project from the Community Land Trust in Brussels. So we will be very curious. We were joking with Joaquin that he's the only one with the library. So there's been a big discussion in these times of quarantine of what backgrounds do you show to sort of share your private space in public. So so Joaquin was the most intellectual one of us, I would say, today. So, but aside of the jokes, Joaquin, we're looking forward to knowing more about how the Community Land Trust, which is an extremely interesting also legal framework to organize communities and access to properties, is handling the situation right now. So thanks for joining us as well.
Thanks, looking forward to the discussion.
Then we move over to Rome, my city, and we have Andrea Simone with us. Hi, Andrea.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
We're from an initiative called Nonna Roma. How would you translate that? Rome Grandma.
Yeah, Grandma Roma. I think I will leave the original name.
Maybe we keep it to the original name, Nonna Roma. So we're curious to know more about, I follow a lot of the interesting work you're doing. So we're absolutely very happy to have you with us today as well.
Happy to
Now we move to Athens, where we have Natasha. Natasha Dourida. Hello, Natasha.
Hi, all.
How are things there with you?
Peaceful, I would say. We're seeing Athens in its most tranquil aspect I think we will ever see, and hopefully never see it again, but it's nice in a way, spring in an empty Athens.
Yeah, I mean, there's amazing pictures coming out of all of the cities with these empty roads and stuff like that, which looks probably some of the pictures from postcards or something like that.
It's absolutely monumental.
That's true. Well, and absolutely, Athens, more monumental than Athens you probably can't get, except maybe from Rome. We can get in a bit of a competition with that, if you like.
That's a discussion.
But so, as you can see, we have a very, very interesting, well, and Turkey also. But anyway, we won't get into this type of competition right now. We're very, very happy to have you all here, and we invite our public. So this was a bit to give an idea to our public of who's sitting around the table today. And as usual, everybody is extremely welcome to write comments on Facebook, letting us know also where you lot are, because it's always interesting to know where people are following us from. There's some very unexpected, exotic locations at times, but especially sharing with us if maybe you're involved in some initiatives and sharing some of the challenges our speakers are talking about. And if you have any questions to them at any point, because we will be collecting them and having them in the round discussion in the end with them. So this said, I think, Alessandra, the floor is yours to set a little bit of the frame together with Ugo.
Yes, thank you, Daniela. Thank you guys for being here. Okay, so we can start this afternoon by introducing this idea of the commons. And Ugo, I think that you can give an idea of what we are speaking about. So this idea of the commons, and in particular to describe the context, this phase, and the context in which we are living, connecting to the development of the commons. In fact, as I said before, during our introduction, in our discussion before to be connected, commons are very linked with a public perception to be together, to create political work, to organize activities. And while actually we are living a very different phase, during which the political activities of the commons probably have been developed in different way. I'm thinking, for instance, to the digital tools that we are using for managing our activities. What do you think about the commons development in these days of quarantine?
Well, there is a macro picture and the micro picture that I want to address, 1 minute each. The macro one is that this is going to be a very, very major crisis. Right now, it is a pandemic and it is has a certain features, but to me, this is just another dramatic capitalist crisis that is the consequence of the way in which we've been organizing society. So we had other crises before. Capitalism goes from crisis to crisis. This is its nature. But crises are a very hard moment for those that are on the bottom of the social pyramid, but are also a moment of opportunity, because many changes can happen during crisis and many ideas can develop and unfold, also institutional during crisis, that have no chance to develop in normal condition of capitalist reproduction. So I think that our job here is to try to seize this opportunity. In a sense, when in the late 70s, there was the oil crisis. There was a set of ideas that was out there ready to challenge and to basically destroy the previous organization of capital production, which was Fordism and the Keynesian model. And that was the ideology that came out to become neoliberalism. Unfortunately, it was not an improvement in our perspective, but was definitely a big change. And it happened during a crisis. There was something ready out there that have been prepared for a long period of time by a number of people, and that took that opportunity to become the dominant way of thinking. When the crisis struck in 2008, there was nothing ready. We had nothing on the ground that really could be offered as an alternative. The commons movement was very much in its asking stage. There was not much of an elaboration. There was not much of an organization. There was some commoning, and there have been some experiences after that. If you think about it, the year in which commons developed as a political platform of 2011 was actually as a reaction to that crisis, but it was a little bit delayed, and only then it started to be organized from M15 in Madrid to Occupy in New York to the Arab Springs to Turkey to Italy. Many places actually deployed ideas about the commons as political weapons in that season. And even if then neoliberalism struck back very hard in the form of austerity and more neoliberalism, those ideas have been developing. And we are here because those ideas developed. And I think that therefore we have now some sort of an opportunity to make those ideas become everywhere in the next few weeks and months, ideas that are hegemonic and that actually put at the center of the picture certain kind of things that this crisis have showed very openly, like, you know, the excessive inequality, the mistreatment, ill treatment of the planet that we've been doing, and all these sort of things should be connected and become a political agenda which is transnational and for everybody. I've seen this morning, and I go now to the micro level because I'm sucking my time very fast. This morning I went to do some shopping in Porta Palazzo, as I do every other day, because that's my way to kind of go around. And in front of the bakery there was a common there, a very spontaneous common, a big basket in which people would put in some bread and some food, and whoever could put in stuff would put in stuff and contribute to that common, and whoever needed stuff would simply take it and go home and cook for himself and his family something out there. And there are lots of these very, very spontaneous commons institutions at a very basic level that are developing during this crisis that, you know, I like to think that they came out of some of the debate and the discussion and the subjectivity that emerged in these last 10 years. The notion that there are certain spaces that are public spaces in which on equal standing, who can put in, puts in, and who gets out, and all of that is a beautiful sign of some sort of concrete, coherent physical common that happens no matter if this physical separation is stressed very much by governments and by other institutions. To stop here for this first round. Thank you.
Thank you, Ugo.
Thanks, Ugo. Now, this is very interesting because it really raises how the elements also of how global these challenges that we're facing are, despite of the very local dimension that most of us would then perceive, especially given that we're hardly going out. So the perception is extremely local, hyper local. Never thought that going to the supermarket would be one of the highlights of my week, especially if we consider that obviously the human interaction is so limited nowadays, that to consider also where the community is, and obviously despite the fantastic opportunities that the digital allows us, it's not enough, absolutely not enough. But this brings me also to what we wanted to also to discuss with Duygu, because Duygu, you recently, as we said, published a book on the situation of the commons in Turkey. And you were telling us that obviously the situation in Turkey is, you're not in such a strict lockdown as we are, and most of us. Here, I think between Turin, you've been now, I think 7, if not 8 weeks or something. So I think you're going to be amongst the ones getting a prize at the end of it for the longest perseverance in the whole situation. Duygu, can you tell us a little bit, what is the situation of the commons in Turkey, which we obviously follow a lot, the political debate also of what is happening in Turkey, and also in terms of the government and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the situation of the commons, and how do you see that this is the current crisis of the COVID is somehow affecting it?
Well, the rise of the urban commons, to speak specifically about the situation in the cities, their rise has been definitely been linked to a political crisis. To give a specific date, I think 2013 will be right to mention, because of the protests during the summer of 2013. A lot of practices, a lot of novel practices came into play, and people saw that that they can base their actions on different solidarity networks, which was really important. And from then on, we've seen a rise in the number of urban commons. So I think a definition of urban commons, like we were saying at the beginning of the discussion, is handy at this point. How we formulated in the book is practices based on sharing and solidarity. So we tended to include more the ones that offer a space at the same time, but there are also commons in the publishing sector or digital commons and so forth, different those commons that are using different resources other than urban space, let's say. So a few words about the book. Well, unfortunately, it's not online yet because we couldn't do the book launch because of the kind of lockdown. So okay, here we go. Well, Turkish is not really accessible to the general public, so I will not go into detail, but it's in 4 chapters where we focus on politics of commons, commons and urban space, solidarity economy, and common resources. So it offers a kind of a generic framework to discuss commons. We have wonderful contributions from 9 academics, activists, almost 10 interviews with the practitioners, and 20 inspirational cases we chose from Turkey and Europe. And this is the first outcome of a research project funded by European Cultural Foundation, which is also supported by a mapping practice, and which is a web platform, showing these cases on the map and hoping to contribute to the network of urban commons.
Just very briefly, because I think then we're going to move on also to the next speakers that are also running and managing some spaces. Is the current, up to what point are these, especially when we're talking about spaces and that are such delicate in this moment of lockdown, have they been closed predominantly? Like in Ankara, would you say these spaces have been mainly closed, or are they still operating to some extent?
Yes, most of them are closed because, okay, apart from urban gardens as commons, the cultural places, especially, that they're being closed down. Some of them are operating if they are not commercial spaces, because some of the examples we included in the book, for instance, have, well, the legal status is an enterprise, because the Turkish law doesn't really allow for other legal status to operate, but they have the basics of solidarity economy. So they obviously had to lock down.
Okay.
But they continue their activities in solidarity, especially in solidarity with vulnerable groups, disadvantaged groups, because they can take out is okay, but you cannot really go and sit in a place to grab a bite. And some other networks are, well, initiatives are using their spaces to distribute basic support materials like hygienic kits and maybe food packages for those in need. So yeah, it's a combination of both.
Okay, thank you, Lulu. And yes, it's very interesting, this last point, no? The fact that many urban commons, many organizations are rearrange their activities to respond to the crisis. And so we can leave the floor to Martin from Paris, Plateau Urbain. Martin will describe his organization, but I think it's very interesting to understand how they are reacting to the crisis, considering that their mission is to give new life to urban voids and involve associations and other groups in the management of the building, inventing also new economic circuits. So, Martin, what are you doing in this period? And what are the main criticalities that you are living?
So yes, what happened is that actually we've been contacted very early on by the municipality of Paris to ask us if we could help and provide facilities to help with the distribution of food, especially the distribution of food for homeless people and for those that are anytime the most vulnerable in society, you know. And the reason why we were able to not only say yes, but organize very quickly and do that rather efficiently, I would say is twofold. The first one is that as a cooperative trying to generate urban commons, we've always had in mind that a common is something that should help answer the need of people, that should be able to respond to the critical needs of society and adapt whenever these needs are changing. So this is, first of all, something that has always been on our mind, and something which I would say is on our mind year round, not only when there is a crisis, not only now. You know, the social dimension is something that is always with us, and we're always wondering how we can best address. Sometimes the way we address it is more simple, I would say, than that, which is like, how can we provide affordable spaces for associations, for artists, for workers? And sometimes the critical need is how can we provide food and shelter for homeless people during a sanitary crisis? And the second reason why we were able to do that and to organize very quickly. So first of all, we are not doing this on our own. We are cooperating this site with two other major associations. The first one is the Association Aurore, who are one of the major players in the French non-governmental social work. And the second one is Yes We Camp, District Partners of Plateau Urbain, who are originally a collective of architects and urbanists and builders who are used to provide technical answers, you know, for temporary spaces and for commons. And the thing is that we've been, because of that, because of the know-how of people, some people that have been working in the humanitarian sector, some people that are working in the social sector all year round, we've been able to very quickly put in relation the infrastructure that we had, this common that we were trying to put to best use, you know, and that is indeed flexible in itself because we used to adapt to respond to the need, and the know-how of people that were able to organize very quickly. So very quickly we said, okay, that's the place where we can welcome people, because we did not want to just, like, you know, throw food outside of the window and here you go. No, this had to be a haven for the people that are coming, that are already in a very difficult situation. They needed to have a place to rest, a place where they could access the basic hygiene facilities. Because, I mean, this is a sanitary crisis. So if you just give people food, but you don't respond to the other needs and the other emergencies, you know, there is a problem. So we've been able to give them access to basic hygiene facilities so they could clean, so they could comply with the hygiene protocol to escape the COVID. Then a place where they can get food, a place where they can rest, and they can rest not only like for 10 minutes, they can rest for an hour or two if they need, and a place where they can access other basic facilities such as the internet. Because, I mean, their life doesn't stop either. If you're someone that is living in the street and you're waiting for, I don't know what, papers or whatever, you need to be able to know how this is going, you know. So that's the basics of what we've been doing and what we keep on doing on a daily basis. Again, not on our own. We are doing that as a kind of network of partners involved every day in the social, in the commoning sector. And basically what we've done is putting the kind of knowledge we already had and this flexibility we're working on all year long to be able to adapt and provide this service.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Martin. That's extremely interesting and relevant, especially because for those of us who don't have a home, it's fundamental to be able to be protected anyway in the times of quarantine. This has been something that has emerged very, very sharply. So thanks for sharing this. And this brings us also to the next topic, because the topic of the home and the house is very relevant, and we probably haven't experienced it so intensely, many of us, ever in our lives as in this lockdown. And this brings us to the questions to Joaquin, because Joaquin, you're from the Community Land Trust in Brussels. So Community Land Trust, born with one of the first missions of creating affordable housing through this community structure of the Community Land Trust, the CLT. But you also develop a lot of other services around the neighborhood and community creation. So can you tell us a little bit, how is the situation, how do you see the situation changing, and what is the role that the CLT is playing in this specific moment?
Well, yes, sure. I think for us, well, there are many things. First of all, there is the one specificity, one of the specificities of our model is that we actually do sort of like involve future residents from very early on, which means that they also build a strong sense of community within their own housing projects, which also means that in times like this one, actually, they are really cohesive and really resilient. And it has been shown that many examples of there's many examples of collaborative housing showing that people knowing each other and really feeling that they are part of a community actually are much more resilient and also care for each other much more strongly. So this is one first aspect. I think we've really witnessed also from our housing projects that are currently inhabited. A second thing would be we have also we are also trying to build a community among our members. So obviously one of our first reflexes was to see how our community was doing. So we've been phoning up people to see if they were experiencing any issues, see if there were other people in the community that would be happy to help with some of basic things that could be doing the shopping or something, but also helping them to know their rights, to know that, for instance, they might be allowed to actually get a certain number of benefits because of the situation, or that perhaps they should try and send a letter to the landlord for those of them that are not yet living in a CLT home, that are waiting for a CLT home, that they could perhaps just send a letter to the landlords to ask if they can get like a small reduction or something on their rents. So we've been very much like trying to work on how to support the members in our community, also because many of them are from very diverse backgrounds and are not necessarily very acquainted with their rights and with what they can do actually to get more support. I think this is really like the main aspect of what we have been doing for those that do not yet live in a CLT home. And all in all, I think we've seen a lot of people like really wanting to care for each other, or a lot of mutual aid. Neighbors from our projects are really happy also to come by and try to give a hand. And I think this is really these moments are really the kind of moments where you really feel that projects that are based on solidarity, on mutual help, on cooperation really do make a difference, and that they really help to make communities stronger and members stronger and really more resilient.
Thank you, Joaquin. And this point, now trying to make the difference. I think that in this phase is very important, especially for people in need, vulnerable groups who are facing many difficulties in basic services, and especially the provision of food is one of the main activities that in this period association are developing. And on this, I want to involve in our discussion Andrea, Simone from Nonna Roma.
Hi.
Hi, Andrea. Nonna Roma is a young association, if I remember well, and you generally provide many services to people and families in different neighborhoods in Rome. But now you are organizing a very special effort, to deal with the crisis. So what changes have you seen under the crisis in this situation?
Yes, Nonna Roma was founded 3 years ago, and it's basically run by young activists living in a very gentrified neighborhood called Pigneto. When we started to do our activities, we were shocked by the amounts of families living in hunger or in fear of starvation just a few blocks away from our places. So we realized that how far our city was from achieving food security for all its inhabitants. Before the spreading of the coronavirus, our ordinary activity included a food aid program. So which was collecting the merchandise and to distribute them on a monthly basis. But the food aid program is just a part of our overall activity. Along with that, we provide many services like free legal assistance, a work help desk, a charity school, psychological support, and many others. We also launched a sort of fostering entrepreneurship program, which helps to assist bottom-up grassroots initiative from our beneficiaries. So we think that these kind of activities are pivotal to guarantee our people the possibility to emancipate. Unfortunately, things have changed dramatically since the start of the pandemic. So we aren't able to host our people at our places. So we need to perform our food aid program, delivering food at home. And we witnessed a sharp rise of the number of families asking for help, from 300 families to more than 2,000. So now we receive calls not only from traditional vulnerable groups, but also from middle class, so professionals, students, teachers also. We have a pace of more than 10 messages incoming every hour. So this means organizing dozens of food drives all over the city. We are able to do that because many new volunteers joined the group. So this group now counts more than 200 people from the region of 50. So we are also receiving an incredible financial support from the community, old and new supporters. And this is, of course, a necessary condition to keep the program sustainable. On a less bright side, we are not able to keep alive all the other activities which characterize our program. So we launched an online sort of after school and babysitting program to lessen the burden of child management from the adults, and also to help our young people to keep their curiosity and interest in studying. But the main difference is that we need to downsize our institutional mission, which is the creation of a community of mutual help. This entails a mutualistic approach and a peer-to-peer kind of relationship that is not replaced by a sort of dynamic of helpers versus helped without a mutual engagement. Finally, community needs short social distance, especially when we talk of marginalized poor families that usually live in isolation and social distancing in normal time. So to sum up, we are more on the emergency side than on the reconstruction side, but I think this is a necessary phase, hopefully temporary.
Yeah. No, thanks, Andrea, because I think this also raises, I was having an interesting conversation today and they were saying, we got the term wrong. We shouldn't call it social distance. We should call it sanitary distance and social closeness.
I agree.
So I think that's a very good point that you're raising, and the fact that also you're all doing an amazing work in handling the emergency, but this will be the next round of conversation is about, okay, but what's after the emergency, and what do we need to make sure that you lot don't overcome, are not totally overwhelmed by 10 messages an hour on for people asking for food is showing this quite something. But this brings us then to also speak with Natasha in Athens. You have you are one of the people running an organization called Communitism. So I think more than anybody, you're definitely in line also with this spirit of sharing and community building. Can you tell us what is the situation now in Athens? How much are you managing to run some activities? Is it all shut? And can you tell us a little bit more about what you're experiencing directly?
Yes, in our case, I would say that there are so many sociocultural spaces in Athens, community run especially. So in a way, we are one of the few examples that work in that way. We are also relatively a new project of 4 years. So before that, we had a period of huge growth. It was going very rapidly. So in a way, it also caught us in a period of, I don't know if you can understand it, but of a plateau, where in the first 3 years of growth, we were carried away by creativity and connecting and the sense of community, but we also found ourselves realizing that the sense of identity is getting lost a little bit. So we were anyway at that moment of having to redefine our identities that have been formed through these 3 or 4 years. So in a way, this lockdown, you could say that works beneficially for our community in the sense that we are taking the time to decode what has happened, how much have we grown, how it has affected our individual personalities, what do we want to do next, and how will we achieve it. On the rest, the building, it used to be an abandoned cultural heritage building in the center of Athens, and it's been granted by the owners in exchange of restoration. So in a way, we don't have an emergency in terms of sustaining the building. We are calm with that, and the building is being used by many people in different levels. For example, part of our solidarity mechanism is hosting people, residents, either displaced people or homeless people or people from our community. So some people are living there at the moment, and at the same time, we are happy that we can provide it to them. And so we don't have to worry about them being on the streets these days. And at the same time, also them being happy and grateful for that, they are returning to the building this period in terms of restoration, because they have all the time of the world to do it. Other people within the building, we are functioning, we are operating a maker space, a cinema, a gallery, a clothing donation space. So these spaces are not working at the moment. So the people that are running them are taken aback by the lockdown. They are missing it, and and they go every now and then for maintenance reasons. And this is where we meet each other every now and then, and it's like meeting old comrades that you have lost, and we discuss about how each one of us is approaching the situation. And then, of course, there are the ones who work on the association part, the writing and the digital part. However, we are very hands-on. Our community is much more hands-on than digital. Mm-hmm. So the ones writing, I think we are also taking the opportunity to relax a little bit and think of our next steps and perceive what should be our actions. On the rest, each one of us is active in several other initiatives that are working at the moment. So we communicate, we have our network on, and we are focusing a lot on connecting to our networks digitally so that we share our insights so that we are ready for the next steps when this comes.
Okay.
More or less.
I think it's interesting how you're raising also and giving a lot of importance in the discussion to the digital dimension, because also we see that, as you're saying, some of the community is very hands-on. The digital divide has emerged quite evidently over and it's not just a matter of age, but especially of economic means, whether you have the infrastructure to be able to access the community online. Meanwhile, I would like to just let you know, because it's not just the 8 of us in this Zoom discussion, but we have a lot of people that are following the discussion and sharing a lot of comments. So just to let you know that everybody's been very active, also just saying hello. A lot of people in Paris saying hello to Martin. And also from the surrounding cities. People asking also for a link to the book by Dourida. So you're going to have to, even if it's in Turkish, I think people rely on Google Translate or open source equivalent tools. So I think you're going to have to put in the chat a link to that. And we have a lot of questions that we're keeping to the end. So in the best of traditions, we're running a bit late on time, but I believe that this is because everybody's engaged in the discussion. So we will need a little bit more time to go through everything, and also to ensure that the very interesting questions we received are going to be discussed with you in the end, okay? So, Ale.
Yes, we can continue with our conversation, and we can pass to the second round, but I think it's very connected now with this first one. And Ugo, you introduced in your first contribution to our discussion this idea that this crisis is the typical product, also of the neoliberal and capitalistic model of development. And I think that in the contributions of our friends, this was very clear. I'm thinking to the distribution of food, the legal assistance, the responses to the increase of the rent, and so on. So let me know, what do you think? Let us know, what do you think about the future? And in particular, how these responses organized by the Commons can reinvent a new model of development, if we want to use this expression, or how we can change our political and economic situation, starting by using and exploiting the cooperation and the Commons movement.
Okay, so well, I'm very worried for the political situation, because I believe that there is a very strong restructuring of a bio-fascist model right now all over the world, with power that takes and seizes the opportunity to introduce further surveillance, further police state, further extraction, further concentration of power and capital. So I think that the situation is extremely complex, that there is a big need to be very, very awake and extremely critical in our thoughts, because being caught in the dominant narrative is very easy indeed. And the separation between being providing for real needs and being actually active in trying to support those that are on the receiving side of the disaster, and the narrative of patriotism and the general community and things like that, the margin is very thin. It's very, very easy to fall from our good intentions to the dominant rhetoric. So this is actually something that I think it's crucially important. We need to refuse to be transformed into patients. We need to refuse to have the substitution of law with medicine, because law, as bad as it is, contains and cuts away and maintains the idea that people are subjects. Whereas the medicalization of society, especially the health, the mental medicalization of society, is a controlling process that doesn't allow any subjectivity to survive. And this is something that I'm really worried about. And this has to do with the transfer of capitalism from the material world of physical connection to the frontier of the internet. Okay, this transformation, this transfer is something that has been going on for quite a long time now. And this is just a new, very, very strong passage and move in that direction. Schools are moving there, universities are moving there. This is the dream, and is the dream of surveillance capitalism, is the paradise of the incumbent, is the place of de facto relationship of power. And it is very, very important to be aware of this. Okay, so said that, the spaces that we have to use, I believe, now as before, are the spaces of counter-hegemony, are the spaces of organization. And we now feel how important it is to be actually organized in such a way that resistance can become political. And this is where, to me, the commons movement is exceedingly important. If we actually, and the work you guys are doing is very, very important. If we actually can create some strong and serious permanent network of relationships between equally minded citizens, between people that want to remain active, between people that want to maintain, to be thinking, between people that refuse to be patients. Okay, all of that requires to be organized. We've been isolated over the last 15 years by telling us that each one of our predicaments is only a predicament of ours. I think in this crisis, we see that the predicaments are very common, and also the social answers to these issues are very common. And therefore, there is a lot of common way of thinking among many of us, just if we get honest and we try to be transparent and we try to be, decent people in this world. But there are a lot of indecent people. There is a lot of people that are gonna profit from this. There are political processes that are already profiting from the situation to strengthen themselves, to take away rights of citizenship. This has to be refused. The commons have to show very, very openly and very politically what they are doing. All what I heard from you guys is just fantastic. I think you've been showing that we are a real welfare system that works in this situation. when the governments are failing, where you know, the experts are just blabbing and are many times they are kind of corrupt and in conflict of interest, and they work and for different hidden agenda. Commoners are actually really out there to do stuff and to think about it. So I'm worried, very worried. I'm worried for the freedom of speech. In Italy, it's already going on. There is a unbearable political correctness on what we can say and what we cannot say. Questioning power is very difficult in this kind of situations. Bigotry is rampant. Assertions of power by, you know, enforcers is very difficult. So there are a lot of bad signs out there. There are some good signs. It's our job to actually structure, connect, and relentlessly organize ourselves in order to be there to resist globally when there is going to be a very, very bad time waiting for us. We should not be like it was Greece, that it was alone. It was alone. Now, what happened to Greece is happened to everybody. And we left Greece alone quite a bit. Many of us did, at least. And now we have to help each other, because resistance needs to go from the bottom up. Otherwise, we are just screwed.
Thank you, Ugo, for these honest and motivatory words. I think that was definitely explaining some of the challenges we have, but not only leaving us in desperation. So we are grateful for this. And I definitely feel that I could see a lot of the faces nodding, because I think everybody's feeling for the words that you said. From my side, I can say a lot of the members of Eutropian in our organization are from Hungary, and definitely the excuse, let's say, of this current health crisis and the COVID crisis has been a strong opportunity for the government to take even more power. And this is something that we definitely have to make sure that we make sure that this is not the opportunity to be more and more like this, which brings us, I think it's a very good transition. Also, Duygu, in Turkey, this has been, you were already mentioning how a lot of the community activities and sharing activities has been really as a way to counteract the action of the government. What do you see ahead of us? Where do you think that Urban Commons can help us? Where do you think that you see that, at least in your context, is the biggest fragilities?
Well, to pick up from where Professor Mattei left, like to say...
We'll call one another by name here, so otherwise it starts getting, if you're not with the professor title.
Okay, that's a cultural thing. Side,
but
okay.
He's Ugo, even though it's not that...
It's because, okay, I'm an old guy, come
on. Here, the measures taken by the government, some of them don't have a constitutional basis. Just to give an example of the good things gone bad, we have a lockdown since 21st of March for people over 65, a complete curfew for them. And it doesn't have any legal basis whatsoever. So we have a lot of examples like this. The situation is not out of hand like the Hungarian case, but there's a lot of discussion going on because of the measures introduced. I'm repeating myself a bit, but the measures have increased the inequality already existing in the society. And this has led to many unforeseen things like hatred towards all people. Whenever people would see someone, let's say, over 65, they are reporting authorities and using really harsh comments in social media. So we have seen very interesting, not so positive faces of our society in this period. And another question is access to education. We have digital education now because schools are closed since a while, but many students do not have access to digital tools necessary to continue with their education, or already vulnerable groups like the homeless, Roma people, those who depend on literally the streets to make a living, for instance. are heavily affected by these measures. And another example could be the app recently introduced by the Ministry of Health that shows those who are COVID positive, which is quite, I guess, quite terrible to think. But okay, let's turn it around, and let's also speak a little bit about how the commons thinking, let's say, has responded so far. I think in the Turkish case, at least, the already existing local practices have increased in scale and visibility at the same time. There's one wonderful platform which makes possible for people to support those who are not able to pay their bills. These kind of networks, we know that they operate on a neighborhood scale, like word of mouth works, but this is a more systematic answer to that question. So you can apply, make a simple application to this platform, and there's someone who's just paying your bills. So this is just one example. And like Ugo was saying, the basket thing is also in Istanbul. I think people saw it from Naples the first time, and so they're leaving baskets full of bread and like other groceries for those who are in need. I think yeah, well, what we can assume is that these practices we've seen might start to operate on a larger scale, because now people have seen that it's possible to be effective on a larger scale, especially using digital platforms of solidarity. And this breakout of the pandemic will lead to new ways of local organizations. One last word might be the local government response has been quite surprisingly in line with commons thinking, but was in conflict with the central government. So we have a competition between local governments and central governments for organizing solidarity campaigns, which is weird. They're asking the citizens to donate, whereas our taxes should be used for responding to the crisis. Yeah, the local government solidarity campaigns are blocked by the central government because they're mostly oppositional parties. But they have also devised, I think, really nice examples of offering support to certain groups employed in certain sectors that are heavily affected, also in terms of hygienic reasons like waste pickers, or meal offerings through, especially during this time. This is the beginning of Ramadan here. So it'll be a month of fasting and everything. And 2 metropolitan municipalities, which account to like 6 million people, have introduced this meal offering campaign. So also the local governments are, I guess, affected by this commons thinking. I would like to see it this way, at least.
Yes, I think that we can organize a special webinar on the competition or the cooperation between local authorities and the national ones in this crisis. But I think it's very interesting to understand how local authorities are dealing with the crisis, in particular, considering how they are enhancing, in some sense, the effort of the social cooperation, and they are building, in some cases, a sort of new alliance that can be a solution also for the future and indicates a new model for the development of the commons. But at the same time, and I pass to Martin, I leave the floor to Martin for this answer. There is the other face, of this problem. In many cases, we know that organizations and associations who work in the field of commoning have a strong relationships with local authorities, and the sustainability of their experience is also connected with the support of public funds. So, Martin, if you think to the situation in Paris, since Plateau Urbain has a very strong cooperation with the city, how do you think that this relationship can evolve after the crisis? Are you worried for your work and your sustainability model?
Oh, well, you can never know. I'm always trying to be an optimist and hope for the best, and think that, as it's been kind of pointed at by the two previous speakers, that you can hope that this is going to send a strong warning sign, to local authorities on the fact that we need to act differently, we need to work together differently, and we need to think of some issues, especially the most pressing urban issues, and especially when it comes to society, differently. I would say that right now, what we are doing is trying to, again, deal with the emergency and do the best we can. This kind of more political side of things, and in some ways you can use the word lobbying thing, is something we are trying to do all year round, trying to show that what we're doing is actually helping build different and more resilient models, is something that we are trying to show on the, if not on a daily basis, on the, let's say all year round, we're trying to say, okay, see, if we work together, if we try to be intelligent together, we have ways of benefiting the community and without hurting any big political projects. The thing I would be kind of worried about, and I think we need to think of right now, is how, as you said, can we make this relationship evolve in the future? Because it's not only a question of saying, hey, okay, we were very, very glad you were there when we needed you, but no, thank you, goodbye, and as you were. So that's, I was going to make a stupid joke and say that when you're afraid your lover is going to leave you, you tell them you can change. And when they're back, you tell them that, no, actually, you're still the same. So I think that's what we need to be careful in these times, is that we need to try and build partnerships that are going to last beyond this crisis. And by that, what I mean is that, the way you deal with space, and especially the way you deal with and occupy urban space, is always something which is political. Because if you have a space, you can let the use of for people to shelter, for people to organize the distribution of food, for people to respond to emergency crises. And you consciously decide that actually, no, you're not going to let it. Or you're going to let, okay, you can use it temporarily, but it's going to be at a very, very high rent, at very, very high price point. Then in some ways, you prevent them from doing it. So the question is, and that's kind of something which is, again, an all year round lobby for us, is if the space is vacant, if a building is vacant and there is a sound and solid project to use that vacant space or that vacant building to put it to use for the community, for the benefit of the community, please find ways, give us legal ways to occupy the space rent-free. And when I say us, I'm not only meaning Plateau Urbain, it can be any other player which is in this field and that has a sound and solid project. Let us occupy the space rent-free, so at least the space is not going to waste, and we can create actual real value, which is not a value in terms of money, which is a value in terms of what we can give back to the community, and how can we make that urban inhabitants are actually people living somewhere and not people surviving somewhere.
No, thanks, Martin. I think this raises a very interesting issue about also how what Dourida was saying was cooperation and conflict with the public administration, both within its different levels, but also with the commoners. One aspect that I think emerges also from what you're saying is, on the one hand, because the activities being carried out have such a strong public and social mission, there has to be support, collaboration in financial and spatial and easing bureaucratic procedures from the administration, from the public. But also there is the necessity of making use, especially when we have the possibility of using space, of making sure that commoners also are able somehow to be also autonomous from the public, so that we're not completely dependent by the pocket money, so to say. And I think this raises also the issue, because Joaquin, with the Community Land Trust, you have a very interesting also financial model. It's not completely public. You also integrate private resources through the model. So where do you think that there are possibilities also for the from your experience up to now, for urban commons initiatives also to be able to somehow be autonomous from the collaboration with the public, or if not totally, at least partially? Where do you think that there are some aspects that we can consider for the upcoming future?
Well, first of all, there are aspects, but I would like to emphasize that public support is essential if you want to, especially if you want to reach some among the people that are the most disadvantaged in society. If you don't have any public support, unfortunately, there has been a lot of pressure from, say, neoliberal political agenda to like non-profits and kind of like commons and initiatives. Well, you can just do more by yourself, and while you can find the means, be creative, But I think this is something we really need to really take a stronger stance against. If we are going to actually, at the end of the day, it is political to decide what you're going to be doing with public spending or not. So I think we really need to emphasize that it is absolutely crucial that the state continues to support, public authorities continue to support what we do. That being said, we do think, our fundamental contention as community land trusts is that land should be actually used for the common good and not as a speculative tool. And this has actually quite wide-ranging consequences. This actually means that special planning should be done another way. The way we actually use space, as Martin said, is also very political. And we need to get together with other also initiatives that are really, I think this is a fundamental aspect of it. So in this respect, what we have done so far is actually to try to get together with other commons initiatives, with other social economy initiatives, with the nonprofit sector, and get together and think, well, okay, so what can we do now to actually create spaces that you guys can use, that we can manage in the common interest, and how can we finance all of that? Well, first of all, we can just put together what we already have, which is already quite a good start, because a lot of organizations do have actually buildings here and there, and then we can try to think, well, okay, so who do we want to be relying on? Do we want to create like a cooperative where we can, for instance, be involving loads of people from citizens and from foundations and other actors that are interested in supporting the kind of solutions we want to come up with? Well, yeah, that sounds like something we'd like to do. And we're actually in the process of creating a land cooperative here in Brussels, together with other social economy actors, with other commons actors. And in a way, it's actually sort of the right timing in a way, because right now, actually, there's a clear choice that will be in front of us. Do we go back to the old neoliberal capitalism, financial capitalism way of working in society, or are we really actually looking into some sort of a transition where we actually try to move to a more socially and economically and ecologically just society, and this implying obviously the way the city develops. So what we have been doing right now with the same folks that we've been working with in terms of trying to create this kind of like what we've called the common ground. This should be the name of our cooperative. So let's now create also the political common ground, and let's now all put together for like a more just transition. And we actually calling actually on Monday, I think, or Tuesday. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but we should be publishing like some sort of a call to actually create some sort of transition in a more just transition in Brussels. So we are actually getting together. We are kind of different initiatives. I mean, the sort of like Brussels equivalent of our friends at Plateau Urbain called Communitism, for instance, are really pretty much involved together with other organizations. And we are really kind of like, our fundamental contention is to say that, well, you know what, the transition is here actually. There are a lot of really interesting practices going on. So now we actually need, in our case, the regional governments to take a stance to actually be political and actually support these transitions. And if they do support them, then we can really make the difference. So this is like the fundamental thing we're trying to do right now, not obviating the fact that we do need actually support from the state, and this should still be a political priority, but still creating the broadest possible movements that can really support us both financially and in terms of political influence and involvement of people, and so on.
Yes, thank you, Joaquin. I think it's a process of mutual recognition. No, we are learning from this crisis that there are many groups in Europe that are working for building solidarity, and in particular for taking care, no, of the cooperation and a certain way of living that we have built during these years. It's not a news, it's not an emergent practice, the way in which we are facing emergency. Of course, it's an extraordinary situation, as Andrea said before, but I think that we are exploiting a patrimony of knowledge that we have developed in the age of the crisis and in the age of neoliberal capitalism, as Ugo explained us. So in some sense, I think that well, it's quite difficult to think what we are learning from the crisis now, because we are in the crisis, we are facing emergency. So it's difficult to discuss about the lessons of the crisis in some sense. But it was very interesting was what Andrea from Nonna Roma told us before. No, it was very interesting when he said we are building a peer-to-peer relationship. We are building mutual aid, and this is very different from the discourse of assistance, no? Because we are building together a response, and we are involving also participants in the work we are doing. And in fact, Andrea, you explain us that the number of the volunteers that who participate to your activities increased during this phase. So Andrea, if you think to the life of your association, the political engagement of your association, what are you learning from these experiences? What we can learn with you from these experiences, and how we can strengthen it in the future and after the crisis?
So we definitely learned that our community is vast and generous. So people are willing to help and to serve the cause of relieving the social conflicts and crises affecting the place where they live. Community can become more dispersed and fluid, but still can be able to thrive. However, I think that emergency doesn't provide the perfect condition to make big changes, but it surely gives us the opportunity to learn how to become more resilient as a community. It's our aim to ensure that the mutualistic principle to which we aspire becomes an increasingly strong, stable, and supportive reality. So the community is not only a source of sporadic solidarity, but it's a stable reference, even in everyday life, that allows people to exchange knowledge, skills, and help, and to allow an increasingly large number of people to get out of marginality and isolation. I'd like to share a few insights from this period. First of all, I think that the boundaries between institutions and associations become a little less relevant. So many municipalities administration, which were not very collaborating before the pandemic, now are in a constant contact with us. So we are becoming a structural node of the welfare network of this city. And the fact that we are not a public institution should be object of deep political reflection. If civic associations are so pivotal for the well-being of the city, we expect from the administration of our city consideration, respect, liberty, and most of all, support. Support is mainly needed in terms of financial support, but also in terms of provision of space. Urban commoning in terms of space sharing can be constantly opposed and seen as a risk for security, as it is commonly depicted in the political discourse. We have changed more than 5 locations in the last 3 years, and we finally obtained a temporary location by our municipality just 2 weeks ago during the crisis. This must be something valid also for the long run, not just for the sake of this emergency. I think also the boundaries between associations become less relevant. We are all working together, even groups that take very different political stances. So this could be maintained also after the end of the crisis. It's our hope. Second thing we learned is that the political measures taken are not effective. The government opted for a plethora of financial support. We are not congruent, that are not distributed in a rapid way and with very long procedures. But most of all, they leave aside many people, all the ones working without a proper employment status, all the ones living without a proper house rent contract. I think we learned that we need a universalistic measure of financial heads, which should include everyone. If I have time for a final consideration.
Go for it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think that we learned that people need engagement. It's not easy to receive if you're not able to give. And this is a common feedback we receive from the people we assist. So many people that are calling us for the first time are not comfortable to be on, let's say, the other side of help. So this confirms our mutualistic approach. The ambition is to be able to keep this new expanded community together, new volunteers and new beneficiaries. We don't want 2 sides of help, just one space of mutual help where problems and solutions are given a collective answer and perspective.
No, thanks, Andrea. I think that raised a lot of issues that were there. So there's.
Can I just say one word?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very important point that I think we should think to make this meeting a little bit practical. Maybe we should come up with some document to be shared by hundreds of experiences like that, requiring something of the stuff that was said. Because one other thing that is always struck me in these things is that everybody of the ruling elite is now only talking about measures by governments and by states. You know, we asked the European Union to have money. We want to put money on this and money on that. And this discourse is only about money and is only about public money. Whereas here there is a lot of people that are getting rich out of the crisis. There is a need to engage politically. There is a need to go after those that are profiteering from this kind of situation, and there are very many. And this is a very, very deep political moment. So I think that if a small document could be organized and written down and then shared by hundreds and hundreds of community among the world and among Europe, would be a very good exercise in spreading out, in moving fast, and in requiring a different approach to the relationship between those that give and those that take, suggesting that, you know, because we are a community in the world, everything should be seen as a give and take. So those that give and those that take are actually doing something reciprocal, something that is good for both. It is good for the one who takes some food from the one who gives the food, but it's also good for the one who gives the food because it gives meaning to his life. And therefore, this sort of a vision of a solidarity which is horizontal and which refuses this sort of paternalistic approach that is coming out, especially from the European Union and from the northern states and all of these kind of things, I think should be worked out. And I really urge Simone, Andrea to kind of, or you, Alessandra, or you, the group of you guys, to sit down there, just make a couple of pages. I don't know in which form, but to set out very clearly that the Commons has a phase 3 vision, a vision of coming out of this that is different, and it is a real turning point, and that we are ready for that, and we are showing that we are already now, without waiting time and stuff, and this should be done. and should be done by you guys because you are the right age group and you are the right international connections, and we can all work together to try to do that and to make it become a powerful political document of a real transnational nature.
Thanks, Ugo. That's a very, very good, would have been very good for the closing mission, but this is not, we're not to the closing. But what we can say for sure, Alessandra, and you jump in, is that we will be anyway writing an article with the main consideration and learning points out of this discussion. So I think this would be definitely maybe a basis that from our side we can put as a as something that we can work on together, because this also connects up to the fact that we're receiving loads of comments and questions that we will probably not be able to answer all. So but this is a good point, what Ugo was raising about the fact that this discussion is not closing within 10 minutes or so when we will be just finishing the discussion, but it's only the beginning. So we will be anyway, for those who are following in this discussion, we will be anyway staying in contact with sharing the documents and so on. And we received comments from throughout Europe, from initiatives from Stockholm to other initiatives in Eastern Europe, but also from some South Africa, from New York and so on. So I think this would be also something that is quite relevant to be sharing. Natasha, now that Ugo has risen the stakes of the discussion, we'd like to know from you how Communitism is aiming at looking at the phase 3, as Ugo was quite rightly saying. So the long-term aspect, after all this is over, how are you going to be operating your space, and where do you think that you also need support for it?
Yeah, maybe I wanted to refer, like when Ugo said about Greece and how Greece was alone, I kind of started realizing that we have a kind of advantage here. Because 10 years ago, we found ourselves in a huge crisis, and we were indeed alone, and we had the state against us, really. So I think that in a way, the society here, maybe this is why we can also be calm in that period, because solidarity mechanisms are already in place. The peer-to-peer connections and the mutualism is anyway happening, because that was our way of making it through the decade. So in that sense, for us, the way I perceive it here, this is a pause. It's not yet the crisis. In my opinion, the crisis will be coming in summer. You know, it will be coming in September. When we see who were the groups that suffered, you will have uprisings. When we see how each country managed it and how each state imposed or chose to not impose and trust its citizens. So for us now, this is a pause, and we are taking the valuable time to rest from the previous decade and expecting I'm sorry, it's not very optimistic, but we are expecting it to come. And again, for us, in a way, we know that this time we're not going to be alone because it's global. So there is going to be more understanding in it. As like another gem maybe that we got out of the crisis, our crisis, is that resistance in this meta period, resistance is not necessarily a good way to apply politics, in the sense that you are reacting to the action of someone else. So we are much more investing on creativity, on creating ways, trailblazing ways, making our own ways, so that we are sure that whatever ruling elite exists at any moment has not yet decoded it, so they cannot block it. So I think that this will be the direction that we will keep moving. Anyway, we are not, for example, we are not publicly funded. We never were, and we didn't want that, because then we knew that we would have to abide by someone else's rules, whereas we were trying to make our own rules and establish them as well, convince more people for them. So in a way, we believe that when the crisis really begins, our model, the model that we are suggesting, that is more an economy than a financial model, if you understand, that a community provides assets that are not necessarily financial, but can bring down the numbers, because communities can bring in resources, that elsewhere you might have to pay, but your peers bring them in and you don't have to pay. So we believe that our economic model might find more willing ears in the next period. We are saying that as many empty buildings in the city, so many creative communities in. And I think that in the next period, when there will be more people lacking resources in order to be able to be creative, or more building owners that are losing their buildings because they cannot be commodified in the years to come, I actually believe in a way that initiatives like ours, all of ours, might actually thrive, might have an important role to play. So in a way, as a community, I think that most of us have been developing ideas about training in growing our own food or becoming more energy efficient, trying to find new ways, or maybe even the old ways, retrain ourselves in the old ways, so that our creativity will never be blocked.
Mm-hmm. Now, thanks, Natasha. I think this has raised also, and the fact of saying also, reminding us also how, because of what happened in Greece already back then, you already built an infrastructure. And this is also in the other episodes discussing also of different fields in which solidarity activities are operating, even in solidarity tourism, in cultural activities, that where the infrastructure was already set, they have managed to survive, or are managing with great difficulty to survive this crisis, and hopefully will manage to survive the upcoming crisis that, as you said, will be even harsher. But this raises also to some of the questions. We apologize with the audience that we won't be able to go through all of them. There's been a lot of interesting comments that some have been answered also throughout the discussion. For example, they were asking Natasha if you are using public premises and so on. And I think your comment also raised a discussion that was going on with Mattei and Joaquin of what is the relationship with the public administration. And I think here we have a lot of diversity within Europe about how much conflict do we have with the public administration when we run in community spaces. So I think there a lot of things have risen. I would like to share with you a couple of questions that were coming from the audience, and please, those who are not having their questions read, please don't get offended. Still keep giving comments and so on in the discussion, because our speakers will be anyway having a look at the questions that were online and being able to then comment further. So as we were saying with Ugo, it's not that we finish the discussion in a few minutes. But we got a comment from Juan Arana, that is related very much to this. That is, for example, do you think commons are seen as something that will help the aftermath of COVID? Do you think the broader public sees this as an opportunity, or is it something that we're speaking also only with small audiences? How visible are we as commoners seen from the broader audience? We also got a very interesting comment from South Africa, also mentioning about the fact that they have realized that in this times of quarantine, and some of you were also mentioning it, the digital divide has been very, very harsh and sharp. So both in terms of education, but also in terms of access to information and services. People that are actually cut out of the digital access are actually less in contact also with the information of the services that they could access. So somehow the information doesn't reach them. Have some of you experienced some of these issues from the comments that were arising from our guests, from our public?
Well, what I can tell you is that when we started organizing this food distribution and sheltering of people, of course, we did publicize it through the, I would say, usual channels of Facebook and everything and so on. But the most important was to be able to give the information on the very good old paper flyer format, because the people that are actually living in the street, or that are already like, well, the people that don't have access any normal day, even out of the crisis, to Facebook, to LinkedIn, to whatever you want, the information they need is going to be passed on to them either through the word to mouth, or it's going to be given to them through a leaflet, So that was actually one of the crucial things to do very quickly at the beginning of the crisis when you organized, was to be able to make sure, that we would be able to transmit the information through other channels than the digital one.
I would like to answer also the question about the public premises. We are not. We chose to work with private building owners because the bureaucracy in Greece was too much for us to acquire a public building. So it's a private civic sector partnership. And digitally, for example, we used to organize through weekly meetings that we can no longer hold. And we never managed in these 6 weeks to have a digital meeting. So, we look for each other, we call each other, we go to each other.
This raises some of the comments where, for example, should we promote more public commons partnerships? So I think, Natasha, you're saying that we should promote public-private commons partnership towards embracing a little bit of a
private as a way of taking the private out of their privacy into the commoning sphere. It goes with what Andrea said, like the peer-to-peer. The owner is just another peer. He's not an authoritative figure that owns a house. He's a peer that owns a place that he cannot sustain, and the community is another peer that can offer maintenance, something that they couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
So the discussion has been actually quite intense. There's been a lot of issues coming up. I would like to maybe ask if you have a last round of very, very short comments that you would like to raise, also given what your colleagues around the table have been sharing. And then we will close with some of the next steps, because it's not over. I think we're all overwhelmed with the quantity of things that came out. So I think we will leave it to the next steps. But what we were saying is, we're running these episodes once a week, and we're now cooperating with the GECO project to try and make sure that the issue of the commons in their broadest sense are brought into the discussion, and trying to use the opportunity of thinking of what are the next steps. So what happens now is, very simply, you will be, as you have, those who have been following us know that after a few days from this episode, there will be an article with a bit of a summary of what came out and the learning points, which will be shared with you. And this can be a basis to try and create, I don't know if we can call it a sort of manifesto or requests for the political mission. Let's use some time also to think about this. But the other thing that we also want to invite you all, and Alessandra, I'd like you to share some words about this, is also about how can running projects that are operating in the field, like the GECO project that is developing a mapping and toolbox on the commons, can be an infrastructure that we put to the service of those who are actually operating on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Daniela, I think that this webinar has been a good starting point for implementing the network of GECO, but in general, to present the work that we are doing, that is a sort of service. We are creating a digital infrastructure for facilitating contacts at the European scale. As I said before, in many cases, it's very difficult to have these connections, even if experiences are very similar, no? As we discovered during this webinar, and not only in an emergency phase. So if you want to discover the activities of GECO, you can visit our website, generative-commons.eu. And now we are completing this digital infrastructure, and it will be published at the end of this month or the beginning of May. And you will be able to use it for free. So if you want to register your association or your public initiative, please use the infrastructure of GECO. And you will find many digital tools for creating the network and for exchange practices and information through the experiences in the map. Consider that actually we have mapped more than 200 cases in Europe. So we are building our network, and I think it's a very interesting starting point for increase the number of experiences and for increase the sharing of experiences and good practices. So we are working as researchers, we are activists, we are testing solutions, models, and tools, and we want to create tools for supporting these experiences because we think that we can learn from each other and we can share our backgrounds and our solutions to deal with all these problems that we have analyzed in short in this emergency phase during this webinar. So visit the website, you find our contacts, you find our newsletter and email, so we can build together this network.
So this is the beginning and not the end. Maybe as Natasha was saying, this is just a pause. So now what we will do is I will ask the speakers not to leave immediately the session. Stay on just one more minute with us. But we would like to, all of us would like to say thank you for the audience. We've had like about 100 people following us live in the discussion, with bombarding us with comments. So the speakers will get back to your comments and questions, sharing links and information and explaining better about their situation. So with the given time, this is what we have for this time, but we will be back on these channels soon, sharing more of information and more discussion, and thinking together also about how we can build together the phase. As Ugo said, it's not phase 2, it's phase 3 we have to really think about. So on these notes, I think it's also a big goodbye from us, and we wish you all the best. Bye bye everybody, thank you.